with the perspective of the next 7 generations. Once that starts to activate inside of people, these little systems will start to be held accountable, because we'll be more powerful. We know how, where our power comes from.
Sure.
Once we activate our natural power, because like in reference to this Andrew Tate stuff, I speak in those whole worlds that are projected out there as the masculine community, whatever the fuck that is, this whole thing, just like the feminine community. Who is this? Who's like in reference to what H. Rep Brown said in reference to the color of money, who's changing the color of money? Who's changing the color of the discussion? Who's changing the focus? That's where the true power is. If you're giving all your power away to this, first of all, what are they doing with that information? Are these people natural leaders? How would they stand next to our leaders? How would Andrew Tate stand next to Khalid Muhammad? You see what I'm saying? Like, when you look at this shit, you're just like, this is worse than the fucking joke. This is actively a joke that is counterproductive, because you have entire communities who are following these weak ass people who are being perceived and training other people to be artificially strong. And they're actively weak because all of their so-called strength exists in a world that is meant to go against them. They're not talking about how the world is designed to keep the masses of people down. They're empowering themselves with the perspectives of these worlds to promote the benefit of being engaged fully in that world. And those are some of the most, I wouldn't say the most potent like enemies that are out there, but there are some of the most active pieces of shit that are out there who are really doing more harm than any good. If you look at the numbers, they're keeping people away from putting themselves in a space to organically receive the information that needs to be received, put themselves into a place that they need to be standing up into a space to engage in the world from a strength outside of that world that's not happening with people who come from that world. These little people they're coming from that world. They get their power from that world. All of the stuff that they hold near and dear to their strength, it comes from an illusion. So we're not breaking those illusions by accepting these groups and these communities as the masculine community, the feminine. The masculine community is just as organic and real as the feminist movement. It's the same shit. There's no difference between the two. Back then they wanted to do it with the feminine movement, because they wanted to feminize the so-called black movement. They wanted to lighten it up, to soften it up. So they installed the feminist movement at the same time that we were coming together and are doing our thing and asking questions that were way deeper. So we had Malcolm that was out there talking about these depths way deeper to many degrees. MLK didn't, like, compared to what he was talking about right before he was killed. But this is why they focused on him because they were trying to hide the work that needed to be done from the perspective of Malcolm.
Wait, let me ask you this. Just so on a baseline level, do you think there's something that could be described as like a standard of masculinity relative to, I don't know, how men move, and then relative to dealing with women, the world at large?
There's a standard of masculinity that exists outside of the world at large.
I'm saying
that still comes separate.
Like in the real world,
yeah,
like of actual human beings dealing with nature.
Now the man and the woman is forced to interact in the world.
Sure.
So the real man is going to address the world. They're not going to fuck with and lower themselves to within the world. They're going to empower themselves outside of the world. A true man who is about life. Like if you're a man, you're a protector of life, which is your family. We are a family in Oakland, in the Bay Area, around the world. What do we need to protect as people here? What do we need to protect as a people of the world? Who are the ones who attack us that we need protection? That's what a real man is going to stand on and present him. He's not going to empower himself within the system that is going against his life, against his power, against his organic nature. So if anybody is wanting to come to this world from that perspective, ground yourself in something real, not in this broken ass shit. Don't be separate from it as far as like, oh, I'm just not going to pay attention to it, because part of your engagement as a man within this reality, like I said, is the protection, or is the life, like to allow life to grow, to allow life to be. If you're alive, that's what kind of drives me every day. Like, all right, well, you know, I'm here. What am I going to do? You know, and when you have responsibilities in life, then that's part of your life. And when we're engaging in stuff like this, when I engage on my channel, that's part of my focus. It's like, okay, well, this is how I'm going to communicate with the macro life, my responsibility as a man to the macro life. And in the micro world, we do what we can to do, you know, protect and keep life, you know, in that space. But these two different worlds, these individuals like Andrew Tate and all these other people are not there. They haven't even no concept of that responsibility to their ancestors or to the next 7 generations as a man, because they don't see that as part of their reality, because the system that they come from doesn't see that as a reality. The power comes from that system, and they're just like, okay, well, this is what powerful people in this system do. I'm going to do what they do, so I'm powerful. But they're only powerful up to the color of law, the color of money, the color of what power they give.
You
them.
say that, but I've heard Andrew Tate, not that I'm a fan or whatever, but just staying objective about the idea of influencers and just whoever is presented in front of us. But at the same time, and I've said it before with streams, like with my guy Hulk and Days of Noah, we talked specifically, did a stream talking about Andrew Tate and his kind of quick rise and then him being like sort of pseudo banned or whatever. But then I've heard like at one point he was like the most searched person on the internet. And then some video of him talking to Tucker Carlson or whatever, and him saying something about literally talking about the whole thing with CV and for rich people, there is no CV. Rich people are able to do whatever, and saying a lot of things that were straight gems, objective truth, to where it's point where it's like, all right, again, I think in terms of normies being weaponized against people in mass. So even if Andrew Tate is some kind of like perfect archetype of this modern pseudo masculine, whatever push guy, hyper social media influencer type, whatever guy, I think we're so far off the rails relative to, I mean, even some Gen Xers to millennials to whatever. It's gonna take somebody like that to be able to remotely reach any of these people who are so anchored in this stuff. I think we're that far behind to the point where it's like, I don't know. I'm not so quick to. You see what I'm saying? I'm not so quick to. I see it for what it is. Like, I don't follow Andrew Tate. He's not my icon for symbol of masculinity. But I've had guys over the past few years from YouTube hit me up offline to ask me questions about their actual personal life. So I understand how many lost young men, how many young lost black men there are out here. So to the degree that if somebody like a Tate is going to have millions of people looking at him, and he's going to drop some gems to potentially crack some normies open, I gotta say that's a win, because that could be one more person or a million more people who can't be weaponized against our collective freedom.
I see that.
I don't know. You see what I'm saying?
I agree with that. Like I said earlier, in reference to the worlds that are out there. On a micro level, Andrew Tate could be a 99.999 forever percent the man to do whatever he needs to represent the manhood. Like he says, he's like, I'm this and that and all, whatever it is. Give him all of that. For example, versus right now, it's still only in the person-to-person micro world that it's relevant on a positive note. Like, it's relevant. I'm not saying it's irrelevant or it's bad. What I'm saying is that in reference to the macro, which is our engagement within the world that he's coming from, that whole macro system that gives him that power, and the responsibility that we have to address masculinity, address the system, address feminine, address our relationships with everything. From that perspective, that's engaged in the macro. And his presence in the micro might be great for the micro, But in reference held up to the macro, it's entirely counterproductive because it's externalized masculinity. He doesn't have any internal strength. His internal strength comes from the outside space, and then he just regurgitates that as, you know, outside strength. So people who have
so you're saying it's a matter of like perception, right?
This is what it is. He is an externally strong man speaking to internally and externally weak men. That's his whole
shtick. I think we're so far off the rails. That's the only way you're going to reach those
exactly.
dudes.
That's what I'm saying. 1 out of 2, I agree with. And this is where the system plays those numbers by playing a piece on the board like him. Mm-hmm. They put that out there because they know if they engage people in that interaction when they're not ready, they're only going to go so far. A lot of them are going to be self-destructive. They're going to take what's being done and flip it and reverse it and try to do it in their own way and actually fuck it up. And that's what I'm saying in reference to the long-term changes and the macro changes. When I put it all up on the board and look at it, it's counterproductive. It's extremely counterproductive in reference to the possibilities that could be from somebody, like I said, if he stands next to a Malcolm, if he stands next to a Khalid, the strength that comes from all of these naturally strong from their ancestral lineage with a reference to the next 7 generations and beyond, and a holding accountable of this system. That's a strength that can't be fucked with and that can't at all be measured.
Well, I mean, if that's
a masculinity,
if that's the bar, the measurement barometer, then of course he's nowhere near those types of guys.
It's not the bar. I'm not saying it as a bar for people to attain. I'm saying as far as engagement in the overall the communication of men around the world who have a responsibility to engage in these storylines. It's not an expectation on men to be, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying.
Just the same way with it's not an expectation to be like Andrew Tate, but he does like tell people to like try to be like him. What I'm saying is that in him like wearing that persona the way he does and all the other things that are part of it ends up being counterproductive from my perspective when you come at it from the macro perspective. There's nothing of any, like I said, when you're presenting somebody who has one strength to people who are, you know, completely don't even have any strength, then this person looks like a god. He looks like a king, you know. But when when your potential is to have 20 strengths, 30 strengths, if you were to not be limited by that bullshit that he presents for you to mimic, that's what I'm saying. He's cutting down on the potentiality of the real man.
But who is there, like absent of him, who is hollering at some of these lost dudes who are super weak? I'm
not looking for or even think that there needs to be somebody to speak to the world like that. It's irrelevant. It's not required. It's not needed. I don't see that. I'm coming from a space of knowing that whatever shift is going to happen that needs to happen is going to happen without people like him. It's going to happen naturally. Everybody's going to do it on their own. This is what I'm saying back to the whole numbers thing and that all this stuff. Yeah, people are triggering people to do certain things, but it's still within a world, a certain demographic, a certain mindset with the intention to only go so far. That's what I'm saying in that. So if I'm existing in the world, like I said, only to present this and then step away because I know they got to do what they got to do, he's not doing that. He's presenting people with a form, a book, a Cliff's Notes for a masculinity. And when people do that, they go out there and they pass the test. And how you pass the test, you get money, you get bitches, you get this, you get that, you get, you know, down the laundry list of what he says you need to do to be a man. And all of it's going to implode very soon.
Well, no, I mean, to me, it's no different than what I've seen the by and large trajectory narrative of most hip hop shit, right? Like, I grew up with that.
Same shit, same storyline.
So my thought process is the way hip hop stuff is now, like there was a certain level of consciousness to hip hop or whatever, but then it's all been overtaken by the trap, now to the drill, and they went to this whole emo trap weird stuff for a minute, kind of now it's just drill, whatever, smoking on packs of whoever, to even the song the other day. Did a video on where the chick is literally saying ABOR, like literally talking about going to the clinic, blah 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 blah. Like like she ain't gonna have no baby daddy because she's gonna go get rid of it. Like literally a rap song with that, the video in front of her Planned Parenthood. So like the trajectory of that. So I think if we got millions of young folks out here that are on this, my life is gang, young Dolph, whatever, rappers dying, thuggery, trap life, thug life, whatever. We just out here, we living, tearing shit down, shooting shit up, whatever. And if somebody like Tate does say something like, hey, well, these elitist type folks are actually playing you, and I know because I got money and I move in certain circles and I can see it. He's kind of at least presenting himself in such a way where he's showing behind the curtain of that, but he's speaking to people who would be more inclined to listen to him because he moves like these rap star type folks. So I'm saying it from like a reverse social engineering type concept. Because if I talk to most of these young guys out here, they're gonna be like, you some square ass dude that's blah 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 blah. Because you ain't lit, you ain't turned, you ain't trapping, you ain't. It would take somebody who's at least moving like a Kevin Samuels or like a Andrew Tate to reach some of these guys, because the archetype of masculinity or success. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, like we're so far off the rails that it would take something like that to reach those people. And I only say that because if not, they're just going to fall into the same social engineering that allows a young Thug or whoever, or a young Dolph or whatever, or a Fauci to socially engineer these people into being weaponized.
Which is what they're aligned to do, and they can't do anything else. And there's nobody else's responsibility to get them out of that. They have to get out of that themselves.
Well, then we're done for then.
So, I mean, that's the thing. You can't. Nobody's here. You can't. I mean, if that's. I mean, you see what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying, though, right?
I'm saying it from
you
the
can't
standpoint
stop anybody from walking off that cliff. If that's what they're.
But the problem is, and that's a perfect analogy. I can't stop anyone from walking off that cliff. But here's the problem: we got 1 million people walking off a cliff, and I'm in that crowd, and I'm caught up in the wave with them trying to battle back away from the cliff. That's my issue.
You're saying other people are going to push you off the cliff?
I'm saying I'm being dragged in the current.
Nobody can push you off the cliff.
Well, I'll put it to you this way. I've managed within the past couple of years to not be forced to do certain things that a lot of people would try to play along with, but I don't take for granted that those waves could get stronger and stronger.
The waves can get stronger, and that's why I said, in order to help people deal with not being pushed off that cliff and dealing with the waves pushing towards that cliff, is to empower themselves at the most organic and deepest level. These individuals, the numbers that they're affecting are not active numbers. They're not actively engaged numbers. The system is working to engage on the level of people where they're not really actively engaged. This is what I'm saying. The system plays the numbers of the unengaged masses in order to control the little bit of engaged masses. So people like Andrew Tate are, and I'm talking about energetically engaged, like people like energetically can't be fucked with, because there's also a lot of NPCs out here. There's number fillers, there's clones, there's all kinds of shit that's going on here, and it's really the controlling of the narrative, the dialogue, and if they get numbers, if they get people to follow these certain perspectives, then that is going to control the numbers of everybody else and the whole, then that's all they need. That's why they play the big number scheme. So Andrew Tate, he's playing the big numbers. He's tapping into all the beta males, all the wannabe alpha males, all the people who are stuck online playing video games all day, fucking feeding themselves to death, not doing shit, and they don't feel like a fucking man because all they do is feel like a boy eating games, looking for toys and playing video games. So he's put out there like a fucking queen, like the royalty meal for people to eat up, and people are just like, why does this fucking guy relate to me so much? Because you're not a fucking man, because you're and you have all these receivers for manhood that are being artificially filled with your Call of Duty fucking games that are out there, and you have an artificial manhood life being filled with an artificial manhood representative. And that's what these people are, because they're trying to find their manhood in the world that is actively against our manhood as a whole,